Judges. Deuteronomy 16:18 through 21:9. Shofetim defines the status and function of judges, the king, the priests, and the prophet in Israelite society. The people are commanded to set up cities of refuge where someone who was killed accidentally can find sanctuary. The blessing. The portion Shofetim takes us on a journey through the inner landscape, giving us a vision of 4 aspects of self that must be discovered, cultivated, and refined. To receive the blessings of Shofetim, we must look within and do an accounting of these aspects of self. As these aspects are acknowledged and honored, we are blessed with a life of consciously growing ourselves in holiness and wholeness. The first aspect comes to us in the symbol of judge, the administrator of justice. It represents the power of discernment. As we step onto the spiritual path, we learn that a basic and essential component of consciousness is the ability to discern. There are so many voices within that vie for our attention, all of them claiming to be the truth. Our perceptions of reality are colored by our conditioning, passing moods, hormonal changes, habits, and by the prejudices of the cultures that have shaped us. In the pursuit of justice, our judge within takes into account all the pushes and pulls of these forces of bribery. In the pursuit of justice, she balances the power of love, generosity, expansiveness, with the powers of rigor, limits, and boundaries, while keeping the eyes of the heart wide open. We rely on the judge within to discern and make audible the subtle voices of wisdom that might otherwise be drowned out by the din of fear, jealousy, or habitual patterns of thought. He points us towards those subtle perceptions so that we can make room for their wisdom to be manifested in our lives. In the panoply of inner conversation, the judge learns to be suspicious of certain voices and to give absolute truth to others. A keen discernment of the forces of the inner landscape allows us to see the outside world with a new clarity. When our prejudices have been unmasked and our reactivity tempered by understanding, then we can pursue justice wholeheartedly. Our hearts can remain open even in the face of difficult choices. The Torah portion Shofetim tells us justice within and justice without you must pursue, and then you will receive the blessing of life and inherit the land, the opportunities of incarnation that God is giving to you. The second aspect comes to us as king, representing mastery and our identification with the God spark. When the aspect of judge is refined enough to discern the inner voice of mastery, that part of us which is fully identified with the expanse of soul, then the judge, using utter discernment, raises up a king. Now, the king rules by merit of his connection and identification with the source of wisdom and compassion. The aspect of self that is king speaks from that source point and can, from there, access the widest possible perspective. Shofetim cautions us that the ever-present danger to this aspect of self is inflation. The blessing of the king connects us intimately with the source of all wisdom, power, and riches. Yet there is a danger in accumulating those gifts as if they, rather than God, were the goal of our quest. Jeremiah articulates this danger well when he says, "Let not the wise one glory in his wisdom, and let not the powerful one glory in his power. Let not the rich one glory in his riches, but let one that glories glory in this, that he understands and knows me." Capital N. That the aspect of self that is called king is the part that consciously knows God. It is the part of us that is intimate with the mystery behind creation. Through that intimacy, the king dons the robes of mastery and the crown of sovereignty. In knowing God and in recognizing ourselves as a spark of the divine, we learn to exult in the majesty of the cosmos and bask in the radiance and nobility that is our inheritance. This aspect of king allows us to embody spiritual authority when necessary. The third aspect of self that we are called upon to discover, cultivate, and refine is symbolized by the priests and Levites. This aspect represents our commitment to spiritual practice, ritual, and artistry. Just as the judge within discerns the true and faithful king that shines through us, that king shows us a vision of the unity and integrity of all that we perceive. The vision flashes and fades and is given to us in bright glimpses that inspire and encourage the holiness that we are. Now, how do we sustain that flashing vision? How do we unfold the implication of that awesome glimpse of the unity of all? The priests and Levites within us rise to this challenge and bless us with practices, rituals, and forms that are meant to imprint that vision onto the fabric of our lives. The priest stands between life and death and shows us the pathways of holiness and balance. She is the healer who sends us to face our own disease. The Levites give us the song that will lift our hearts into generosity and give us the courage to see the truth and act righteously. They show us the dance that will sanctify each step on our journey. The priests and Levites minister the forms of our religious life. They teach us how to celebrate and how to mourn, how to return when we have fallen away from ourselves. Yet even these beautiful forms, inspired by revelation and majesty, can become rigid and confining. Pulled into the details of ritual and form, we can sometimes lose track of the big picture, and the intention that created the ritual in the first place can get lost in the particulars of practice. We may also find ourselves seduced by the beauty of the song or the cleverness of the text. Then God raises up from deep within us the fourth and last aspect of self, which is called prophet. The essential quality of the prophet is that she is wholehearted before God. The true prophet has not been corrupted by ambition, has not become lost in the forms or influenced by the passing fashions of the age. The prophet's mission is to be a clear channel for the divine flow and to identify the ways in which the divine flow is being obstructed. He cuts through self-deception and shatters the defenses so carefully constructed by the personality. The prophet cares nothing for nostalgia, sentimental attachment, reputation, appearances, or the norms of society. He shakes things up when we get too comfortably complacent. He calls us back to our true essence when we have wandered too far. The prophet calls us back to our depths when we become infatuated with those other gods of the surface world. The spiritual challenge. After blessing us with the fullness and richness of our inner aspects of judge, king, priest, and prophet, Shofetim sets forth a challenge. Each of these aspects emerges consciously as we step forth to deal deliberately with the situations that life presents. But it is the nature of mind to Babylon, in a reactive chain of association, habit, and contention. The mind has a comment or argument about everything. One thought compels the next, and we are caught in an endless cycle. What do we do with the reckless power of our unconscious? How do we break free from the tyranny of the mind? In order for the voices of wisdom to emerge, we must interrupt that cycle and enter a place of refuge from the cacophony. From that place of spacious refuge, a new voice can emerge, a new course can be set, a new song can be heard. To describe this unconscious thought that captures our awareness and leads to a reactive and compulsive chain of babble, we use the language of Torah and name it a murderer, because its chokehold on the mind kills all possibility for true wisdom to emerge. This murderer is one who kills accidentally without evil intention. Thus we designate the random thoughts that flip through the untrained mind without clear or deliberate focus. One thought compels the next, just as the avenger of one murdered is forced to set in motion a cycle of violence that is endless. The only hope we have for interrupting this cycle and giving our mind the spaciousness that is required for wisdom to emerge is in our establishing places of refuge within us. We are commanded to set aside cities of refuge so that there may be an escape from the tyranny of the mind. So important are the cities of refuge to the inner landscape that the Torah repeats this commandment 3 times. The establishment of these cities of refuge in each corner of the inner landscape ensures that wherever the mind wanders, and however far the sense of being lost in the labyrinth of mind, we can find a way back to center. Guidance for practice. There are 2 practices for this week of Shoftim. Building a fire tower in the forest of the mind. The first practice for this week of Shoftim is to notice carefully the workings of the mind. Set a timer and spend 5 minutes each day just watching thoughts. Notice how one thought connects to and compels the next. Learning to notice the processes of the mind is like building a fire tower in the forest. The process of thinking is like wandering through that thick forest where your only view is of the trees immediately before you. When you build the tower, it is possible to gain a clear view of the whole forest with all its interesting trees and animals and pathways. You may still be thinking yourself through the wooded landscape, but part of your attention watches from the tower. The next step, after noticing the machinations and patterns of your thoughts, is to practice interrupting those patterns. When, during meditation, I noticed that I had been captured by a rogue pattern of thought or by a tape loop that is compulsively repeating the same thoughts, the watcher in me knows that it is time to revisit the city of refuge. I gently and silently say the word Ata, which means you. I have programmed this word to release me from the content of mind and send me to the city of refuge, where I can rest in pure being. Choose a sacred word that can be used as a reminder to let go of the content of thought. The more you use this word, the more powerful it becomes in the process of unsticking you from the stickiness of thought. And at some point, you won't even have to say the word to yourself. The awakening of the watcher and the mere impulse to say the word will effectively release you from the thought and send you to the place of refuge, the place of simply being. This practice will build upon itself in time. As you better know the workings of your own mind, your periods of being lost in thought get shorter. You catch yourself sooner, and returning to the place of refuge inside becomes a compelling and nurturing experience. Giving voice to the 4 aspects of self. Another practice for this week of Shoftim is to identify and give voice to the aspects of self that the text describes: judge, king, priest, and prophet. Which of these aspects of self is asking for your honor and attention? When an aspect of self is not fully honored by simply being acknowledged and given its rightful place in your awareness, its shadow may emerge. The shadow may become overcritical. The king may become inflated. The priest may become rigid and overly attached to the forms, and the prophet's righteousness may become self-righteous. Which of these shadows have you observed in your own personality? Write about these aspects of self in your journal or share about them with a spirit buddy. Shabbat Shalom. Once again, I want to remind you that I'm reading from the book Torah Journeys by Shefa Gold, a wonderful book into the journey of each of the parshas that we read through. And the book can be purchased on this website, Rabbi Shefa Gold. It's a wonderful website with a lot of other incidental information there, and it's worth visiting and purchasing this book so you can go through it yourself at your leisure and study it. I want to wish you all a beautiful, beautiful Shabbat Shalom.